Good morning, y'all. Matt Smith back here with you. Week 9 SEC recap today. Late night last night, watching some after dark games. Straggling a little bit this morning. But let's roll through the 4 game slate in the SEC here to start. So we'll start with the cocktail party. It was a typical kind of ugly cocktail party, as those games tend to be. 3-0 Georgia for a while into the first half, and then bang. Within 2 minutes, Georgia had 21 points. Accomplished mostly by the defense. Got a fumble that set up a short touchdown run by James Cook, an interception that led to a really nice touchdown on a lovely ball from Stetson Bennett to Kyrus Jackson. Made a nice back of the shoulder catch in the end zone, and then a pick six by Nakobe Dean to wrap up the first half, and it went from 3-0 to 24-0 just like that. And the Dogs were on their way to their fourth cocktail party win in 5 years, and ultimately the SEC East title later on Saturday night. So Florida actually outgained Georgia 355 to 354, but Georgia's offense didn't really have to do much. Once that game was 24-0, there wasn't much of an ask for the Bulldogs in the second half. Did break a long run for a garbage time touchdown by Zeus White. But again, not a whole lot needed from that offense once again. Stetson Bennett was fine. He had 2 interceptions. Neither of them were particularly good. One interception is good, but sometimes you get a tip pass or something like that, but those were both on Bennett and not particularly good throws. So going forward, we don't know what Kirby Smart's thinking with JT Daniels. It's not going to matter for another month until they're going to see probably Alabama in the SEC title game. That's when you really need to decide if Bennett's the guy, or it's going to happen like what happened last year when Georgia ran into Alabama and Florida and could not just keep up with better quarterbacks in Mac Jones and Kyle Trask. So plenty of time for Kirby to figure that out. Hasn't really tipped his hand. Bennett's been the guy for the last month or so now. But I still personally think Daniels gives them a higher ceiling. But with that defense, it may not matter as good as they're playing. Holding another team to 7 points. I think that's right about their average now for the year through 8 games. So, again, that defense, just athletes all over the field. I'm not sure I've seen anything like it in terms of the athleticism. But once again, a dominant performance. And for Florida, Anthony Richardson, first start, did not go well, left the game injured, had the interceptions that pretty much ended the game by halftime. I'm not sure his health status going forward. Florida's schedule really eases up in November, so you probably won't hear much about the Gators. I think they got a good chance to win out and potentially a bowl to get to 9-4 to right the ship a bit here. But changes are certainly coming within this program. I don't think that the head coach by any means, that's at least a year, probably 2 away. But probably some coordinator changes. Maybe need to relook at this offense because Florida is quite a mess right now. Despite being competitive against Alabama, it's been an ugly October with the loss to Kentucky, a really bad loss in Baton Rouge, and then, of course, being non-competitive after about 20, 25 minutes yesterday in Jacksonville. So state of affairs, not a whole lot else really to glean from that. Typical cocktail party, and that the entertainment value is pretty low. Again, just had that incredible onslaught of points in those 2 minutes there right before halftime. Outside of that, pretty uninteresting game. Georgia did what Georgia does, and they rolled 8-0 heading into a pretty light November here with Missouri, Tennessee, non-conference game, and then Georgia Tech coming up heading into their SEC title game appearance a month or so from now. Ole Miss-Auburn, probably the most interesting game of the day going in. Auburn jumped on them early, took a 14-3 lead. Matt Corral left the game for only about a series, missed parts of 2 series with a pretty ugly ankle injury, but he came back, gritted it out. It was not himself on Saturday night. How much of that was the injury, we don't know. Had to be a good bet, but his accuracy was absolutely the worst it's been all season. Missed a lot of open receivers, and some of those are just on Corral. They got a lot of injuries around him, up front, in the receiving core. We've seen those units not be able to help him out too much over the past few weeks, but I would put more of this one on Corral. He struggled, failed to complete 60% of his passes. The early deficit hurt them, of course, but a poor performance from Corral overall. And again, we don't know how bad the injury was. He's a tough guy. He's a warrior. We've seen that over the past couple of weeks. He probably didn't need to be out there, but he went back out there, gave Ole Miss a shot to pull that game out late, but just not enough in the passing game. Had an ugly interception in the fourth quarter when they were hoping to cut the lead to about 3 points, I guess. Trailing by 11, threw it across his body, thought he saw a guy, and it was an easy interception in the end zone for Jalen Simpson. That was pretty much Ole Miss' last gasp there. But for Auburn, again, Bo Nix, he's just turned the corner over the past month. Another impressive day, doing Bo Nix magic stuff. but also just being a traditional passer, had a really nice game, completing about 75% of his throws. Tank Bigsby has regained his form after kind of losing that number one back role coming out of the Georgia State game. He had 140 yards, I believe. So just a really crisp performance from that Auburn offense. Everything about that team is just smooth. They look fundamentally sound. They're very competent. Got some Auburn magic, of course, early on with some questionable calls going Auburn's way. Shocking, given what we've seen the past couple of years. But the Tigers are rolling now, 6-2. Only that one SEC loss to Georgia. Everything is right in front of them. And a huge one next week coming up in College Station against the rested Texas A&M as that script flips for the Tigers. They were the rested team this week against a beat-up Rebels team. Now they got to go to College Station, face an Aggies team who's played a couple bad teams, had the week off since the Alabama win, and should be in pretty good shape going into Kyle Field where they look to win for the fifth straight time since the Aggies joined the SEC. So a place where Auburn's had a ton of success, but some situational edges for the Aggies. A fun one. Don't think that's officially the CBS game yet. Probably will be by the time you're watching this. But that should be a fun late afternoon game next Saturday in College Station. I think that's about all I wanted to mention there. The fourth down stuff for Kiffin, it's getting a little much. A couple I agree with. A couple he had chances to kick a field goal. He's got a pretty good kicker. Would have cut the lead to 8, I think, both times with a made field goal. And I get it, but he saw what Corral was by that point. He wasn't himself. Had a golden opportunity to cut the game to one score, put some real game pressure on Auburn, and he eschewed those, went for it. Ole Miss was 1 of 4 on fourth downs for the night. So against Alabama, it probably didn't matter. Even if they converted them, they weren't winning that game. But I think maybe some more sound decisions, not being so super aggressive, could have given Ole Miss a real shot late in that game. That's just not how Lane Kiffin plays. If he's anything, he's consistent, and he's going to go for it. He's rarely going to punt unless he absolutely has to. Gave his offense a shot, and again, Corral had some looks, but just wasn't his night. And they'll regroup, get ready for Liberty next week, and then a really big game for probably New Year's Six bowl hopes coming up in 2 weeks against A&M back in Oxford there. And other two games, the less interesting, Mississippi State 31, Kentucky 17. Will Rogers' SEC record for completion percentage. I'm not sure what the minimum number of attempts is to qualify there, but he had 39 attempts, so obviously certainly would qualify. 36 of 39. And what a turnaround from last year when the Bulldogs offense didn't score a single point. 24-2 loss to the Wildcats up in Lexington. So great game for Rogers. Turnovers have been a problem for Kentucky all year. Missouri, South Carolina, teams like that were unable to take advantage of them. But Mississippi State won the turnover battle 4-0. Kentucky had an early punt return touchdown to take a 10-0 lead, but the Bulldogs scored the next 31 points and put that game out of reach pretty comfortably. So nice win for Mike Leach's team. That offense still struggles with overly athletic defenses like Alabama and LSU. But unlike last year, if you're just facing a team who's got a decent defense, plays good fundamentals, good schemes, the air raid, the dig and dunk raid, whatever you want to call it, is still a problem for them. They've proven that this year, beating A&M, hammering Vanderbilt last week with no problem, and rolling through Kentucky pretty easily last night. So good win for the Bulldogs. Still have an outside shot to get back on the SEC West straight through only 2 losses, but it would take some crazy tiebreakers. So not even going to go there at this point. But especially with 2 key road games coming up at Arkansas, at Auburn, where they could easily take 2 losses the next couple weeks. But they're going to go to a bowl game now. 5 wins, have an FCS game coming up this Saturday before Thanksgiving. So I think that was the goal for success in year 2, was just to get to a bowl. I think a real shot at 7 wins now. Win that game. I think they can go at least 1-2 against Arkansas, Auburn, and Ole Miss. So a positive year 2 for Mike Leach overall. And for Kentucky now, probably takes them out of the New Year's Six bowl picture. Even at 10-2, that resume is really weak with 2 non-competitive losses for the most part. But still a good shot to get to 10, maybe 11 wins. Probably go to the Citrus Bowl is in play for them. But a tough loss in a place where they have had much success, but really thought they could take care of business and set themselves up for a nice run in November with a pretty easy schedule, but did not happen. Again, credit to the Bulldogs, credit to Rogers and Leach for the offense and that complete 180 from last year's game. Mississippi State wins it and moves to 5-3. And Missouri 37, Vanderbilt 28. Missouri D struggled early. They were allowing, I think, 8 yards per play about midway through the second quarter. Vandy had a 14-10 lead. Ended up running for more than 250 yards, so certainly not many strides made by that Missouri defense. They had a decent performance in kind of the middle portion of the game as their offense put up some points to allow them to pull away. I got a Hail Mary in the last play of the half from Connor Bazelak, who ultimately left the game injured late in that one. But Missouri went from a 14-10 deficit to a 24-14 lead. Held on late, won at 37-28. Tyler Brady had, I think, 290 some all-purpose yards, so busy day for him. So nothing great from Missouri. They did enough to win, finally get off the SEC schneid. Vanderbilt now, I think that was probably their only chance for an SEC win. They got to play Kentucky, they got to play Tennessee, and they got to play Ole Miss. That's almost certainly 0-3, so it looks like another winless SEC season for the Commodores. After a couple chances here in October against South Carolina and against Missouri, but did not get it done. And Tigers now, with that win, they get to go play Georgia and Athens next week. That should be a whole heck of a lot of fun for the Tigers. So just resetting the state of things in the SEC title race, Georgia clinched last night with Kentucky losing. 2-game lead, 2 games left to play. Georgia has the tiebreaker, so that's over. Alabama and Auburn, both with 1 loss in the West. Each of those teams can take another loss probably and still control their own destiny in the Iron Bowl. If it happens to Auburn next week, it could get a little clunky with A&M and a tiebreaker. 3-way tie there with A&M, Auburn, and Alabama could ultimately go to the Aggies. So still in good shape. Obviously, if Auburn wins next week, you're pretty much locked into an Iron Bowl winner-take-all for the West. If A&M wins, again, they got a shot. Should Auburn win that Iron Bowl and force a crazy tiebreaker or something like that. Still some tough games for the Aggies, of course, as well. Beyond next week, got to go to Ole Miss, got to go to LSU. So still a lot to shake out in the West, but I'd say it's at least a 50-50 shot at this point. We will get a winner-take-all Iron Bowl in Jordan-Hare on the Saturday after Thanksgiving. All right, I think that wraps up the SEC. Back to full slates next week. Vanderbilt will be off. Ole Miss steps out of conference to play Hugh Freeze and Liberty, and then 6 conference games. We'll get some of those crappy FCS games again the middle 2 weeks in November, but much busier schedules coming up after a couple of light weeks here in the SEC. So let's roll through the other conferences quick. ACC, Wake Forest rolled over Duke. They're 8-0. Go to North Carolina next week. That's not a conference game. You'll see a lot of people confused. This is the back half of that home and home they scheduled because they went 7 years without playing. They'll play next year in the conference game in Winston-Salem. The next week's game in Chapel Hill does not count in the ACC standings, but Wake Forest, who probably has to go 13-0 if it wants any shot at sneaking in the college football playoff, can't really afford a stumble. So they'll go to Chapel Hill, face a North Carolina offense. It was pretty good last night, put up 560-plus at Notre Dame. Irish won at 44-34. Kyron Williams with maybe the run of the year from 91 yards out. Looked like he was bottled up around the 5-yard line. Escaped, got outside, ran it down the left field sideline after he left the game with an injury. So if you haven't seen that one, check it out. But a fun shootout last night. Sam Howell ran for more than 100 yards. Been a real nice addition to his game this year is his ability to make plays with his legs. Notre Dame just too much, though, 44-34. Again, finding a way to win for the Irish, despite not looking super great. But they should be a top 10 team in the first CFP rankings this week at 7-1. And again, just finding ways to win. North Carolina, last chance to save a disappointing season next week when the 8-0 Deacons roll into Chapel Hill. The big upset, I wasn't super shocked that Pitt lost to Miami. I thought that line was way too high, being more than a touchdown for Pitt in this spot. Kenny Pickett threw for more than 500 yards, but Tyler Van Dyke has been really, really good since taking over for De'Aaron King. Had those 2 really narrow losses to Virginia and to North Carolina, but they've beaten 2 ranked teams the past 2 weeks in NC State and Pitt. Still have a shot in the Coastal race. We'll need some help from the Virginia-Pitt top 2 in that division. Whoever wins that game, they'll need the winner to take another loss somewhere else. But Miami's still alive now at 4-4, 2-2 in the league. Real nice performance from Tyler Van Dyke. Disappointing day for Pitt. Again, not totally shocking given their history, but the defense did not hold up at all after looking pretty good last week against an inept Clemson offense. So again, not totally shocking, but good win for the Canes. Manny Diaz has righted the ship over the last couple weeks and probably saved his job, but still got some key games here in November against Virginia Tech and Florida State that could determine his ultimate fate. Nice wins for NC State, knocking off Louisville. Virginia Tech gets back on track down in Atlanta, beating Georgia Tech. Syracuse probably headed for a bowl now at 5-3. They beat Boston College convincingly. Good defensive performance there, holding the Eagles out of the end zone. So a couple of nice wins for the middle tier of the ACC yesterday. And I think that wraps up the ACC. We'll go to the Big Ten. Game of the day. Michigan State, just a fantastic football game. And for all you 12-team playoff people, why? I mean, why would you want the loser of that game to still have a great chance to make the playoff and have the stakes reduced so much? That was awesome. 37-33, Spartans win it. Michigan had a 30-14 lead. Michigan State rallies with 2 touchdowns and 2 two-point conversions. Michigan regains the lead on a field goal, but then fumbles when they were doing the quarterback switching, taking Cade McNamara out, putting J.J. McCarthy in, who's more of a runner. He fumbled twice. One went out of bounds, and then one was probably the one that cost him the game. Sparty recovered. Kenneth Walker ran it in for his 5th touchdown of the day. And Spartans held on late, 37-33. Walker, I thought he was right on the bubble, was getting into the top tier of the Heisman race as we get into November and actually can start looking at that. He's there. I think he's right up there with Bryce Young, with Matt Corral, with C.J. Stroud, maybe with Kenny Pickett. 5 touchdowns in a rivalry game against Michigan. Spartans win. Going to be a top 5 team today. Super impressive for the Wake Forest transfer. Just such a fun game, rivalry game. Again, great atmosphere, packed house in East Lansing. And Michigan State now looks to set up potential winner-take-all game at Ohio State in a couple weeks. But they got some work to do here. Got to go to Purdue. They'll still have Penn State later on. So not out of the woods just yet for Michigan State, but that Big Ten East race as the round robin got underway yesterday. Just a huge first stake in the ground there for the Spartans. And Jim Harbaugh, now 9-10. You do the Ohio State thing with him all the time. He hasn't beaten them. That's fine, but it's Ohio State. They're a machine. His problem is his peer teams, Penn State, Wisconsin, and Michigan State. You need to be above 500 against those teams pretty significantly at Michigan, and they're 9-10. And that's why Harbaugh's not getting it done. It's not Ohio State. It's those games. They had a 16-point lead late in the third quarter yesterday. You need to win that game. They didn't do it. Another tough pill to swallow of many over the last 10 years or so for Wolverines fans. Wisconsin puts themselves in a good spot in the Big Ten West, completely shutting down inept Iowa offense 27-7. Pretty gross game in Madison. And now Wisconsin and Minnesota are in decent shape there for that division. Ultimately could come down to their rivalry game in Minneapolis on Thanksgiving weekend to see who goes to Indianapolis out of the west side of the Big Ten. Ohio State, Penn State, guess we didn't really touch on that. Good effort from the Nittany Lions. Despite all the James Franklin noise this week, clearly has not lost his team. Penn State was right there, gave Ohio State all it could handle. 33-24, Buckeyes win it. Travion Henderson, a really nice day, 150-plus on the ground against a really good defense. But we were waiting for Ohio State to play a team with a pulse. Hadn't played anybody good since the Oregon loss. And they struggled, so maybe pumped the brakes on them a little bit. The talent, of course, is still off the charts in comparison to the rest of the Big Ten. Still the favorites to win the league. But to say, oh, wow, they've totally fixed everything since Oregon, no, still some concerns. That offense had some struggles, particularly in the red zone, had some failures, had a 4th down stop that could have put the game away. So we'll see where the Buckeyes land here. They'll get a couple easier games the next couple of weeks with Nebraska and Purdue, and then close, of course, with Michigan State at home, and then up to Ann Arbor to play Michigan. So big win for the Buckeyes, but probably not the dominant performance we expected given the numbers they were putting up over the past 4 to 6 weeks. Minnesota avoids a letdown with the win at Northwestern. Again, they're in good shape. Got to go to Iowa, but even if they lose that game, have a good chance to win the division by beating Wisconsin at home, or at least getting into a tiebreaker scenario there. So good job by PJ Fleck going on the road, playing a not good Northwestern team, but Minnesota lost to Bowling Green, so they're capable of losing to anybody, but really slammed the door on the Wildcats yesterday and have sole control of first place for the moment, at least in the Big Ten West. Nebraska, another one-score loss, of course, 28-23 to Purdue. That's now 8 straight losses they've had that are by 8 points or less. They're 3-6, probably going to get knocked out of bowl hopes next week against Ohio State. That will be 6 times in 7 years Nebraska will finish with a losing record. Just crazy for this person who had his formative college football years in the 90s when they were winning 3 national titles in 4 years. They're going to have 6 losing records in 7 years. Just crazy. That's Nebraska football right now. Scott Frost still can't win a close game. It's amazing, but nice win for Purdue, again, bouncing back from a tough loss to Wisconsin last week, now with road wins at Iowa and at Nebraska this year for the Boilers. The Big 12, nice day for Caleb Williams and the Oklahoma offense, their most complete game of the year, 52-21 over Texas Tech, 6 touchdowns, 400 yards plus for Williams as the Sooners roll after last week's struggle against Kansas. Fun game in Morgantown. Wasn't a TV game, so a lot of people got to see it. West Virginia outlast number 22 Iowa State 38-31. Iowa State now probably has to win out if they want to return to the Big 12 title game, and a massive game for West Virginia's bowl hopes. Sitting at 3-5 with Texas, Oklahoma State still to come would have not been a good spot, but they're back to 500. And welcome the Cowboys up to Morgantown next week for a pretty interesting game there. Baylor knocks off Texas, another double-digit lead blown by the Longhorns. They led that game 21-10. Baylor scored 21 straight, held on to win 31-24. Baylor in a great spot now. They'll go to TCU next week in a potential trap game before the huge one with Oklahoma back in Waco coming up in 2 weeks. Okay. I think that's good for the Big 12. Pac-12, Utah takes control of the South last night, ripping through UCLA, was playing without Dorian Thompson-Robinson, 44-24, nice win for the Utes. Oregon, no problems with Colorado as expected. Arizona State, a bad loss at Washington State. Couple that with the Utah win, and the Utes now have a 2-game lead over everybody in the South because of tiebreakers. So they'll need to stumble a couple times to blow their lead and not return to the Pac-12 title game for the second time in 3 years. That's the state of affairs in the South. Arizona now 20 straight losses. Gave USC a decent game in LA last night. Who doesn't give USC a decent game in LA these days? But ultimately, USC prevails. It's kind of just a back-and-forth game between 1 score and 2 score in the second half. USC couldn't quite put it away, but Arizona never really had a game-tying possession or anything like that. So Trojans win 20 straight losses now for poor Arizona. Nice win for Washington at Stanford last night to get to 4-4. And they'll host Oregon next week. Good opportunity against their big rival coming up to Seattle next Saturday night. Group of 5, late night, crazy game in Provo. Virginia BYU was 42-38 Cavaliers at the half, but BYU's defense really clamped down in the second half. BYU won the second half 28-7, 66-49 Cougars. Tyler Algier, one of the best running backs in the country, 250 plus, 5 touchdowns on the ground. The defense knocked Brennan Armstrong out of the game late. Looked like he hurt his ribs, might have broken a rib. Tough quarterback. The Virginia offense is super fun right now, so hope he's all right. They got the week off, and then 2 really critical games for them, hosting Notre Dame, then they'll go to Pitt in probably an ACC Coastal title game type setup in Pittsburgh. So hope Armstrong's okay, but Virginia's offense, injury bug bit them last night in Bronco Mendenhall's return to Provo, and another nice win for BYU, who moves to 7-2 and should climb up the polls this week, probably into the low teens, I would guess. First loss for San Diego State. Fresno State gets them again. The Giant Killers go down to Southern California after beating UCLA earlier in the year. Now do it to San Diego State, take another one down. And Fresno State takes over first place of that Western Division side of the Mountain West. Cincinnati struggles again, but again plays a good second half. At Tulane, 31-12. They're still undefeated. Houston wins the big battle with SMU. Late kick return touchdown was the winning margin, 44-37 Cougars. They do not play Cincinnati in the regular season, so they are in a great position to get to the AAC title game. SMU and Cincinnati, of course, will play later in November in another big game in that conference there. But great win for Dana Holgorsen. Cougars now with only that one loss. It's a bad one, the opening week 1 loss to Texas Tech, a game they led and then blew. But since then, they've righted the ship, played really good football, taken advantage of a pretty soft schedule. And now it looks like they're going to have a shot to play for a conference title coming up in December. I think that's it. Best bets were 2-2-1. I got bit by the Florida State Clemson craziness. I forgot to mention that in the ACC preview, the crazy cover with Florida State trailing by 4, doing the lateral stuff. Ended up Clemson scooping and scoring for a short touchdown run to put the final margin at 10. Most people ended at 9.5. I gave it to you at 10 earlier in the week, so I take a tie at least. But bad beat if you had FSU plus 9.5 or plus 10 on or the under as well. That touchdown also registered a win for the over. But Clemson wins 30-20, and they get back to 5-3. So 2-2-1 for me. Easy win with Wake Forest, Michigan State. They won outright, and then 2 tough ones. Not good late at night. Taking UCLA and Virginia. Both of those games not really competitive. So 2-2-1, average week in the best bets. Top 10 right now, we'll roll through that. I got Oklahoma State at number 10. They crushed Kansas yesterday. Notre Dame up to number 9, just finding ways to win, playing decent football despite having plenty of concerns as a whole, but they're winning games, and that's all that matters. I got Ohio State at number 8. Wanted to see them look a little bit better to jump them over Oregon. did not look quite good enough against Penn State to be able to do that. So the Buckeyes still at number 8. Got Michigan at number 7. Don't want to ding them too much for a really tough road loss to a top 5 team. Oregon at number 6. Again, played really well yesterday against Colorado. Bad team, but no struggles whatsoever there. Oklahoma at number 5. Finally a good performance for them heading into an off week. And then their 3-game run of Baylor, Iowa State, and Oak State to close the season should be fun. Got Alabama at number 4. They were off yesterday. Cincinnati at number 3, dropping them a spot. Vaulting Michigan State up to number 2 now with that big win over Michigan. They're still undefeated, of course, and Georgia, of course, at number 1. So there's the top 10 for you. Week 10 next week, scheduled not a ton of great games. We'll kind of go through the viewing agenda here quickly. Noon games, you got Wake Forest, North Carolina. That's your ABC game. Ohio State, Nebraska is your big noon Fox game. So not a ton there. Liberty, Ole Miss, if you're interested in the Hugh Freeze thing, that's also at noon. So watch Wake Forest, Carolina. That could be fun. Carolina, again, they're close to getting a big win, but this is probably their last shot. And should be a lot of points between two really fun offenses there with Sam Hartman and Sam Howell in a battle of Sam H's. Late afternoon, Auburn A&M, CBS. You got Mississippi State and Arkansas concurrent over on SEC Network. Probably the two most interesting games in the SEC, unfortunately, going head-to-head from a time slot perspective as well. Michigan State, Purdue in that window. Can Purdue slay another number 2 team? They did it to the Buckeyes a couple years ago. I don't know if Michigan State will be number 2, but in my poll, they are at least, so we'll count that. Beat number 2 Iowa a couple weeks ago. Had another chance to take down a top team when the Spartans roll into West Lafayette. That's your 3:30 ABC game. And we have, I can't read my notes here, of course. Looks like Oak State, West Virginia. I mentioned that earlier, but fun game up in Morgantown. Can West Virginia take down a ranked team at home for a second straight week? Night games, you got Oregon, Washington. That's your ABC primetime game, rivalry game there. Huskies playing a bit better the past couple weeks. Ducks have looked vulnerable on the road. Can they keep stacking wins and putting themselves in position to still be a CFP contender when the dust settles in December? So fun rivalry game there. In Seattle, LSU Alabama should be a primetime game. Whatever, it's LSU Alabama. What a fall that rivalry has been in the past 24 months. But that's looking like your ESPN primetime game. Then Texas Iowa State, an interesting Big 12 game. Another opportunity for Texas to finally get a big win this year. They've had 4 chances this year. And have missed all 4 times, 3 in pretty devastating fashion by blowing double-digit leads. So good game in Ames there in the Big 12. Both teams, Texas is definitely out of the Big 12 title race. Iowa State's still with a shot, but they got to win out starting next Saturday night against the Longhorns. Late night, UTSA and UTEP. UTEP suffered their first conference loss last night against FAU, so probably not going to get college game day there in El Paso. Would have been fun. Still a chance for it, we'll see, but not likely. And UTSA still undefeated, of course. I think we're down to just 2 of the group of 5 teams that are undefeated now, with San Diego State losing and SMU losing. Just Cincinnati and UTSA left. So we'll see if the Roadrunners can keep it going as they head west to El Paso. And then USC, Arizona State. Not a whole lot of meaning there. Sun Devils still have a shot in the Pac-12 South. But as I said earlier, they'll need 2 Utah losses to have a real shot. So that's your late night Pac-12 after dark game there, Trojans and Sun Devils in Tempe. So I'll call it there. Week 9 in the books, October in the books. Should be a fun November ahead. Can't wait for it. 4 fun weeks of regular season football, plus championship Saturday in December. A lot of questions to answer. CFP rankings coming out on Tuesday. Again, watch Oregon and Ohio State. That's a legitimate stake in the ground. Don't worry about Cincinnati. They can be passed by anyone at any time for any reason. So don't worry about the Bearcats. We know the types of teams that are going to be able to jump them. Your 1-loss conference champions. Maybe even a 2-loss Auburn, so that's what Cincinnati has to worry about. But don't worry about where they're ranked now. It's not at all relevant. The key question is, do they keep Oregon ahead of Ohio State? Because that is a stake in the ground. 35-28 Ducks in Columbus happened. That's not going to change over the next month. If they do value head-to-head, they will keep Oregon in front of them, especially given Ohio State did not look as dominant as they have been last night against Penn State. So there's your quick CFP rankings preview. That'll be Tuesday night. It'll get more talk than it deserves. But such is life in the who's in world of college football right now. So thanks so much for watching, guys. Please like and subscribe to the channel. Reach out to me on Twitter, of course, at MattSmithCFB. I'll have my written recap up later this afternoon on SouthernPigskin.com. And I'll be back on Wednesday to preview Week 10. Can't believe it's Week 10, but college football flies by, as it does every year. All right, I'll see y'all. Thank you.